Hello and welcome to this week's video. You may know that I send out a monthly newsletter, and part of that newsletter is information about a free Zoom event that I'll do, generally one a month, that you're all very welcome to come along and watch. If you're not a subscriber to my newsletter, there's a link in the comments below about how to do that. So this video is the footage from one of those events from a few months ago, where I use a little airbrush compressor and airbrush kit and produce a sunflower decorative rim. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you're not a subscriber to YouTube, please subscribe, and if you're not a subscriber to my newsletter, please subscribe. Enjoy the video. A small OASA compressor. Now Emma Cook sells these on her site, or you can buy them through Amazon. If you buy it through Emma, you're supporting a wood turning supplier, and she also puts in some extras, so it costs a few pounds more from Emma, but not massively so. But what interests me about this is the rating on the adapter here, which is it will take 100 to 240 volts, which suggests it might be do when I go to America and Canada. I'm not sure if Canada have the same electrical system as the US. I should probably try to find out. But the other very good thing about this little compressor is if you unplug the power supply and turn it on, it still works. Now, the noise reduction might be taking that sound off, so I'm going to put original sound on, so you should hear all the sound that I hear now. It has 3 settings, this compressor. Hold it on. Oh, what's going on? Low. So you get a little LED light on the top telling you what setting you're on. You can put it up to 2. Maybe you can hear it gets a little bit of a higher pitched noise going on, and then that's full strength. Now it runs a gravity fed airbrush, and I have to say the airbrush doesn't fill me with too much optimism, but I could be wrong. It comes with an airline as well, and this just screws onto the front, and it says that the compressor will run for about 70 minutes, so I'm going to use it for the whole of the demo, even if I decide the airbrush isn't worth us using. And where this has a bit of advantage over the one you may have seen me demo maybe a year or so ago, that cost me the princely sum of about £35. Where this has an advantage over that is that I have tried it with other airbrushes. I haven't tried it with this airbrush that it comes with yet, but it worked with my siphon feed airbrushes, which is a great bonus. You get a handy little instruction manual in several different languages, but it's a pretty simple, straightforward piece of kit, really. The airbrush, okay, here we go. It's encouraging because it comes with some spare seals that go inside in the different parts around the nozzle cap here, so you get a little packet of those, very tiny. I'm sure I'm going to lose them at some point. And then the airbrush. Now it says in the literature that came with it that it's a 0.2 to 0.3 needle. So that's quite a fine needle. It's an unusual one for me to use because we've got a gravity fed airbrush, the cup on the top, and that is set. Some of them you can have cups that unscrew, but it looks okay. It feels reasonable in the hand. The trigger, okay, there's a nice strong spring in there that's moving back quite nicely. There's not a huge amount of up and down movement, and what I find myself about gravity fed airbrushes is the cup often gets in the way of my finger where I want to have it on that trigger and have a bit more control than I've got there. That doesn't feel super brilliant. Interesting feature on the back for a cheap airbrush is this knob here that will control how far you can pull the trigger back. Now pulling the trigger back determines how much paint comes out, so if you don't want a lot of paint coming out, you can see there I've got very little movement. That would mean I'll get a very small amount of paint or stain coming out. pull back further by unscrewing this knob. It's quite a coarse thread, so you have to turn it quite a bit to get any sort of difference there. So we just attach it onto the airline. All of it is just screw thread. I think they call these 1/8 of an inch size, although they're actually bigger than that. And let's put it on the low setting. So the compressor, of course, will only run when air is being called for. Let me just take off this plastic cap from the end of the airbrush. So it cuts in, and you can see on the top here I've got the battery. I charged the battery fully. There should be 4 LEDs, but only 3 seem to have lit up. So one airbrush, it makes it a bit slower changing colour, so I'll be going through how you can work with that, and through the choice of your colours and the order of the colours that you use. And in order to help get them into your airbrush, the large bottles of stain, you're not going to have a lot of control over pouring them in small amounts into this airbrush cup. So I'm going to use these little needle bottles, and I've got an airbrush cleaner here so I can stand it in there. And then these bottles, I can just put a very small amount of stain in. The little needle dropper, it really generally uses sort of 10 or 15 drops. You'll get quite a bit of use from that, depending on how fast it blows it out and how much control you've got. So it will be interesting to see how that works out. Other thing, of course, protection. Protect yourself. I've got my gloves. They're a little bit grubby, which might be interesting. We might get some fingerprints transferred onto the surface. And the wood that I'm using, let's come onto this camera, piece of beech, 12-inch piece of beech. I've managed to get a splodgy fingerprint on it already, but I've just turned the face of this and prepared it for airbrushing by sanding 180 and 240. 240 is enough for the stains that I'm using. And of course, those stains, if you're not familiar with the stain I use, are Chestnut Products spirit stains, available in the UK and the US, unfortunately not in Canada, but there are other alcohol based stains that are available. So we get some colour on. I've got other layers of protection. I've got a vapor mask, which is I recommend wearing all the time that you're airbrushing, particularly if you're airbrushing with something that's solvent based. And I also, I think you might be able to see it from the reverse view, have here my extractor. So this is an airbrush spray booth that I've fixed on a bracket to the side of the lathe. I've taken off, it had cowling that went across the sides and made a sort of trapped hood area, and it has a pipe coming off the back here, you can just see it, which runs out to the end of the workshop where I've got an open door, so that will pull away a lot of the overspray. I've got it on a little controller here so I can start it up, and you'll hear the noise that makes. If it's too intrusive, let me know and I will change the sound settings on Zoom. So let's come back to the high angle, and well, let's go to the overhead, and we'll start off. I'm going to go through colour order. I'm going to start with yellow, orange and work up to red. So I'm just putting some drops in there. You can see I haven't put a huge amount in. We'll see how it works. I haven't sprayed anything from this airbrush. It's going to be interesting to see what it can do for us. And when I'm doing the spraying, I'm going to pop the mask on just for not breathing in the majority of the fumes as I'm working. So I'll just pop it over my mouth and I'll shout so you can hear me still, I hope. Right, wind that down. So yeah, so we'll go onto this angle and we'll have a look, just a little bit of spraying, seeing how this airbrush works. So I'm on low pressure, pull that. Okay. So that's working very nicely, quite slowly, a lot slower than I'm used to working. We'll try it on the middle pressure.
Stuart, you might want to turn off the background.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that, Dan. So that's off now. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. So I'm going to move it up to high, and we'll put a little bit more in the airbrush. Now I've got a measure of it. So I want to do the background. So what I'm noticing is that the spray pattern is not very wide. It's quite a narrow spray. So if you're wanting to use this to do large background, this brush is too fine really for that. If I go in closer, I get more coverage, but it'll take a long time to fill in that area. I'll just do half of it. But you can probably see here I'm getting quite distinct lines showing of the colour. So just by way of contrast, I'll just stick on my siphon fed brush so we can see the difference. Just going to have to unscrew the airbrush line. It doesn't want to unscrew, so let's do it this way. So these are the brushes that I would normally use, siphon fed. And we can see that's got a much wider spray, a lot more comes out. So we'll just fill that off. Okay. So a little bit of cheating there, and so I think I need to run this on high, and I'll just empty it out. A lot of the overspray, as you can see, is being taken away, I hope, by the extractor. Okay. So let's move on to putting some design on there. I'm going to use do a few things with some stencils that some of you may have seen me use these in recent demos. This is a nice little sunflower stencil. I'm going to add some orange now. There's still a little bit of yellow left in there, but of course the orange will just be absolutely fine mixed with that. It may be that we get a lighter orange to begin with and then it changes. I'm not too bothered about that, but if you're worried about the colours not being a solid colour and it changing as you go along, cover up the end of your airbrush with some paper towel, not your finger, and then when you pull back the trigger, you'll see it all bubbling down in there, and that's going to mix those colours in together. And now let's see how it does. I think this should work pretty well on a stencil. Because I'm working in a much smaller area. It is a much finer spray than I'm used to using with the siphon fed brushes. Okay, so I've got my petals done on one flower. The seed head in the middle for this stencil is going to be a bit of a problem because I need to do that with black, and I'm determined to really just use the one airbrush and show you how we can work around that. But I can put the stencil back in that place a little later on and do those that seed head. Now I'm going to put another one here that's going to be a little bit darker, so I'm just spacing them out, leave some room for that, and we'll do the next one over here. And I'm going to just turn it around so it's as close to the extractor as possible. So let's get that done. Just those few drops of colour that I put in, we've got 2 whole flowers out of that. It's only just coming to an end now, so I should just put a few more in because I think there's room for at least one more orange flower. So I'm just making sure to aim it so it goes down into the needle. That was 10 drops roughly. Well, you have to take my word for it, it wasn't on camera, was it? Eek. So again, I'll come back with the stencil later to put the seed heads on. So we've got one more to go here. I think I can fit, I might be able to fit 2 more in actually if I'm careful. Let's do one up there. So here goes. It takes a little moment for it to kick in with the air pressure, I have to say. And, you know, I press the needle down, the trigger down, and there's a little bit of delay before the air comes. And just while I'm doing this, remember with these airbrushes, these dual action airbrushes, the method is to push down to get your colour coming out, then pull back, push down to get your air, pull back to get your colour, forward to turn the colour off, and then up to turn off the air. If you don't do it in that order, you can end up, if you're using paint, getting a lot of drying on the tip of your needle. Let's go with this one about there. And you can see I've deliberately not contained them all within the border. This one's sticking over the edge. It's my obsessive fear of things being neat and orderly and symmetrical, isn't it? Kicks in all the time. So question from Terry about the needle. It says that the needle in this, it says in the brochure 0.2 to 0.3. I would say it seems to be much nearer to 0.2 based on the other airbrushes that I've got. The one that I cheated and did the other half of the background with, this siphon fed one, this is a 0.35 needle, and it really is a much more noticeable that it covers a wider area. But that said, having an airbrush that gives you a very, very, very fine control in a small area, and we'll have a look at that a little more closely later on, can be quite useful, particularly if you want to do fine detail on things. Okay, last orange one. Yeah, it's taking a few passes really to fill in each petal, and with the siphon fed ones that I've got, it's you know, it'll cover 3 or 4 from this distance quite easily. So this will allow you to do some quite precise shading in some of these petals. If we look at this one up here that's fading to a sort of yellow at the end, I can bring you in even closer. Let's make use of the cameras that I have got. So come on to this one, just bring you round a little bit, and I think you can come in even a bit closer. There we are, that's maximum. So if I just concentrate on this one, is that the one here? Yeah. So with the very fine control, I can get, you know, half of it filled with a much darker colour. I could run something along, which would be harder to do with my siphon brushes. So if you wanted to do something that gave you a bit more subtlety in your colouring, this might be a useful little brush to have. Just fade that in a little. So that would be quite hard to do with the siphon feed brushes that I use. Not impossible, but not perhaps quite so easily as with the finer needle. Okay, I think that's enough of those ones, so we'll pull that off. I'll come back and do the seed heads later on. So I've gone yellow, orange. I haven't had to clean out the airbrush yet, but we'll look at how I clean that out a little later. Put another one here. So I don't mind the petals overlapping, but I don't want petals of this flower going onto the seed heads of the other flowers. So we'll switch the colour up. If I sprayed an orange flower over an orange flower, I'll just get a blob of orange. But if I put red, so it's going to be a bit darker, then I should get a red flower over an orange flower, and those orange petals should fade into the background a little. So there we go, I've put some red in there. Just put the lid on that stain bottle and block the end up. Backwash it's called, so press down for air and then pull back, and you see it bubbling away when I pull back the trigger. So down, pull back. So that's going to mix up the colour from orange to a darker red. So that should show up on over the other flowers. I'm going to work on the petals up here where they're not overlapping, just to give the red a bit more of a chance to get a bit stronger. Leaving that, mixing it a bit, but you can see it takes quite a while to fill in one of those petals. And the best way to build up intensity of colour with the stain is to only put light coats on and then go over yourself. So that's one red flower done. So you can see here that the petals underneath it, the orange ones, look like they're under it because the red is that much darker. But without the black, it actually looks a little bit bare and a bit bland, I have to say. So next one on, and the way I'm able to do this, let me get out the product. So when you've got a stencil that's as fine as this one with all these very fine little veins, it's impossible to hold it flat on the surface. And if you don't have the stencil flat on the surface, you don't get crisp edges, you get a very soft edge. So periodically I have to clean the back off and put some more repositionable adhesive on. So 3M spray mount. And you can use this with all of these plastic stencils. You could probably use it with cardboard ones as well if you're careful about pulling them off. But it's not something that you spray on and then use immediately. You have to spray it onto your stencil and wait 10-15 minutes for it to sort of dry and become tacky. Otherwise it's just wet and it doesn't stick in place. But do pay attention to the solvent based nature of this product and store it properly and use it outside or indoors with a mask. So let's get another red one done.
Bit more colour needed. There, that's going on. I'm just going to build it and make it a little bit darker.
In some ways this might be a good brush for, if you're just getting started, because you've got a much narrower spray pattern, so you've got a bit more control. Get one up here. You can see if you have messy gloves and you aren't careful, you'll transfer stain from your gloves. So a clean way to avoid that is when you're putting the stencil on, pat it into place with a bit of clean paper towel rather than your glove, or don't use dirty gloves. But I can't do it without getting my fingers dirty for some reason.
Right, so next one.
So I'll spray this from a little bit further back and we'll see how long it takes to get the density of colour, because obviously the further back you spray with an airbrush, the less saturation of colour you get, because the colour is much more spread out by the time it hits the surface there. Whereas if I'm in close, we get a lot more intensity of the colour coming out. You could quite possibly do some half decent freehand airbrushing with something this fine. Okay, so let's try and put that cleanliness into action. I'll take off the stencil from there. We've got one more spot for it to go in. Hold a piece of paper on the surface, pat it in, and I get a few little black marks going on there on the paper towel, but none on the wood. So there are ways around getting those mucky fingerprints on.
So here goes, last one. Just making sure I'm getting all the way out to the tips of the flower. Put a
bit more. Might be quite interesting to have it with that variation in the coverage rather than a solid block of colour, but it's not the world's most realistic sunflower. Another thing that you can do with your stencil is you've got a lot of spray on top of it, so just every so often put it down on a piece of paper towel and give it a little clean. And you can see where I've had to go actually cleaning this stencil. Around here, the black, the whole thing was that colour until I went over the top, and to clean it off, methylated spirits, denatured alcohol, that will clean a lot of the stain off. So we've now got our floral ring. There are some spaces where it could perhaps have had some other flowers going. It's a little bit more crowded round here than up there. I didn't put a lot of thought into the spacing. I've got some other stencils, so could come up here and put a little stencil up here. It's not quite as realistic, but it might help to fill in the background a little more. I'm going to deliberately do it with a little gradient of the colour, and then a strong bit in the centre. Slightly different one here. And when I use these with my normal airbrushes, I had to mask off because they would be overspray and it would get caught up in those other flowers. But with this airbrush, I really don't think that would have been necessary. Nearly out of colour. Okay, so we'll pause it there. And now we can move on to the final bit of colour, which is to get some black on there. So again, I don't need to clean out the airbrush. I can just go straight in with my black. And I've got quite a few seed heads to fill in. So I've just done it, so I've just sort of covered up the needle in that little channel at the bottom. So just plug the end of that one up. Clean off my fingers a little bit. And now we'll come back and get the seed heads. Now there was some overspray, as you can see, although I was going round doing the petals, it did stretch a little bit into the seed head. I don't know that it really matters that I find the exact position of this for the seed head, but we've got a nice little, if we want to do that, spot there for this part of the template. I'm thinking that's where it goes if I haven't got it back to front. Turn it round. It's strange, I'm not sure where those tiny little bits were on here. Oh well. I got my sister to cut some more of this stencil for me on her Cricut machine, and it actually proved quite tricky lining it up. There we go. So just hold that centre part in place. I can check the spray on the paper, and we can get the seed head in. Now that's interesting. That's much finer actually, even with the spray, than when I use my siphon fed brushes. Let's try a bit heavier in there. And there we go. So there's a difference. Although I covered that with the spray, the small needle size makes it much finer, but I've always felt that it was a little bit too sparse, the seed head part of this stencil, so maybe doing a couple of sprays through it will ruin it. We'll find out in a moment. Or it might have done a bit of a better job. Yeah, so I'll just quickly move round and do the rest of them. Without the seed head, it's a little bit bland, I think. The black, often if you remember my flaming clouds technique, using the torn bits of cardboard to make cloud-like shapes and gradients, until the black goes on over the yellow, orange and red, it doesn't really come to life particularly spectacularly, I don't think. So a couple more to go. Went a little bit, caught the petals there, never mind. And obviously this bit I'm only pressing down the bit that's needed, and the holes are too small for my dirty fingerprints to run through that stencil. Last one. And so far it hasn't been actually a slower way of working, because of the you know, switching from one colour to the next colour. I want to try and get a bit more density in these seed heads, even if I spray this a little lighter. I think that's a bit more dramatic, so I'm going to do that, and then this one as well. So if you plan your colours to follow on one from the other, you can work at exactly the same speed as I work with having different airbrushes. It's slightly slower, I guess, if we're going to be pedantic about it, because you have to stop, fill up the airbrush, close your bottle up. But that's a very small amount of extra time, really. So just working round. I think I'm finished with the black. That's all gone now. And I'm toying with the idea of some really dark flowers, just as a way of, you know, keeping going with the demo. I could switch to something much darker up here. Again, I don't want petals to go over the seed head, but I'm going to give this a quick clean out, and then we're going to have a few dark purple flowers. So before I do that, a little bit of black, which I need for these seed heads, for the dark flowers on the outside edge. And part of that is to start filling in things on this outside edge, just to take the colour and the pattern all the way around. Because I think the edges are very important in any design that you do. I mean, we might get away, or I might get away with just leaving it as that seed head there. But round here the balance is really off because there's nothing over here. But maybe we can just hint at a bit of a darker flower on that edge. But any kind of colouring technique that you do, I think the edges are where an area that can be overlooked and missed when we get carried away with doing our colouring and don't put anything there. One more just squeezed in here. Turn the seed head round, get a different bit of it in play. And I may not put a flower on every one of these. But you all know I never know when to stop, don't you? Okay. So I can see there's a couple of areas that I'm not super pleased with, which is over here and this bit up here, but I'm just going to give a quick clean through of the brush, and I'll come onto the overhead camera so you can see how I do that. So although it's got stain in it, I'm going to use water to begin with just to clean out and flush out the cup. So a few drops, and these bottles, this is, I think tattooists use them. So it's filled with water. It has a straw that goes all the way down to the bottom, so you just have to squeeze the bottle. When you squeeze the bottle, then the water just comes out. You don't have to sort of tip things up and have them, you know, big opening. And first few goes with the cleaner, just tip your cup out. Try and squirt some of it right down into the body there of where stain will gather, and then empty out. And I'm not too bothered about getting it pristine clean in there, but it is always a good idea to blow through a little bit. But if you blow through 3 or 4 whole capfuls, that can take quite a long time. We'll just do this 1 cupful, and then we'll check how it's spraying. But because I'm going to go to a dark colour anyway, it might not be a problem. You can see it takes quite some time to get that out, particularly because this is such a fine needle, really. Get the last few bits out that way. Give it a little blast through. There's a little bit of water that sits in the top of the cup that hasn't gone down into the channel where the needle is, but we can just give that a little wipe and a clean with a paper towel. And then there's a little bit of water left coming through, but it's pretty clean. Now I'm going to sort of defy nature. We've already got red sunflowers, we're going to have some purple ones, just building up the colour on top of each other. So purple has got red in it, of course, purple being a mixture of red and blue. Oh, would you believe the purple bottle is blocked? So take that off very carefully, and I just try to pour just a few drops in. And the airbrush cleaning tub that I'm using is very handy because it's got a built-in rest for your airbrush there. So let's just give that a spray onto the white and see how it's coming out. Okay, we can see it's purple against the black, so that just flushing out with water. I was trying to time it, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Right, back onto the tailstock camera, and let's find one of those rogue seed heads that I put on and get our template into position, roughly centered over there, press down, so none of the petals on here are going to catch that seed head, although the purple might hide them possibly. So we'll start off, turn it round there so you've got it better in shot. Putting down a light coat over the red. We'll see if it will hide the red. What we might find happening is we get a much darker purple over those places. And sometimes having something dark at the edge of your rim helps to sort of frame what you've got there. So I think that works all right. We come up here, and you may have noticed that I actually sprayed some purple onto the seed head as well, just to fill it in a little more, give it a little bit more interest. Just noticed my garage door was blown shut. Give me a second. It does make a huge difference having the extractor running. But I've also, to help with the airflow, another little gadget, a USB charged fan. So I can have that to move the rest of the air down past me and position it without having to worry about where it's plugged in.
Okay, so get on with the flower. It does take a bit of time to cover the red.
And although I've used this stencil at quite a few demos, I've really only ever actually used it to do you know, one or two of these flowers just to show it off. I'm just getting all experimental now and doing some purple seed head in the middle of that red one. Yeah, I think that is more interesting. So up here, where I've got a bit of a gap, I can just use some of the petals and not have a seed head, so we've got, you know, a bit of the flower, and that will help, as I say, to have something dark around the edges to frame what's there. One more over here. Speeding up now because we're getting into the last bit of time. I need a bit more purple. See if that's still blocked. Squeeze it hard. Oh, if I squeeze it hard, it comes out. And I get it all over my glove. Give that a quick wipe. There we go. Bit of purple seed head there. So that I didn't press down. It gives me a sort of softer edge. Here I've got a seed head, but I'm just going to. I don't want the petals going too far in this part, so I'm going to cheat and not centre the seed head over the seed that I've already sprayed on. So here it's a little bit bare. We'll do that, and then just a little area around it. Don't have to use the whole stencil. Be a bit free-form with this edge. Let's just fill in a bit more that seed head. And then we just got, looking at this, I'll give you a full shot on this camera. So I just need to do something down here, I think, and up on this edge. So up on this edge, we get the seed head filled in. I'll do a few petals round here. And I'll just see if that works for me. That actually works for me, not having all of the petals done. I think it needs maybe one more little area. Yeah, that's a bit more interesting. And tiny little bit here, very small area. It's quite different from the usual sort of things I would consider airbrushing on a platter. Normally go for my geometrical patterns and shapes. But I quite like this. I should turn it into a proper YouTube video one day. So we've got a few minutes left, but I'm not sure it's finished yet, and I've got one particular area that I'm concerned about. I'm sure you can all see it, and I'm not quite sure of the best way to address it, but this bit here looks a bit bare. If I put a purple one there, it might work. Well, I'm going to try it, but I'm just going to do a little bit of it coming up into that area. But if I do one purple flower over on this inner edge, I might need to do a couple more just to give it a little bit of balance, or it might have ruined it. Not super happy with it, but it's done. So we'll have a few more. And then, like I often say, well, I'll say in lots when I do demos, that the colouring will always be lifted if you turn a bit of plain wood next to your colouring. Tiny bit more purple needed. Super alert to just little tiny areas where there isn't much going on, and I think having these sort of incomplete petals or just random petals, they break up break the stencil up a bit, make it look less like every flower is made with the same thing. Tiny little bit of bareness there. Okay, and I think I'm happy with that. Let me just put that down, have a quick look, see what else is going on. No more questions. Oh, hi Cindy, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thanks Dan. Yep, breaks the symmetry up. That's what I want to avoid. It might look a little bit too busy, but another thing that I'll always strive to do, just turn off that extractor now, I'm not spraying anything. What I'll strive to do is usually make my rim wider than it's going to be, and that gives me something to cut back into. So if I decide, yeah, that really has ruined it, I've got quite a lot of wood to come back and cut out from there. I think it could do with something a bit more drama, maybe in some of these top petals, a little bit of darker shading across the edge of one or two of the petal leaves that would introduce a little bit of shadow. That might have worked. And this little airbrush with the fine spray that it gives, you could do that. We all know that this isn't going to last, don't we? I'm not breaking anyone's hearts. So I'll just put a bit of black back in the airbrush and get the extraction back on. And if I just pick a couple of petals to try to put freehand, a little bit. Let me bring you in closer. Where was the one I was doing? This one round here. Just put a little bit of, it doesn't have to be much, a little hint on the edges of some of these petals. Casting a little bit of shadow on what's beneath them maybe. It might take a bit longer to do. Come back a bit further. Again, this kind of very fine detail would be pretty tricky to do with the siphon feed airbrushes. So round here we've got a bit that sort of looks, you know, a bit too clean. We could just tone that background down a little. With a little bit of shadow behind some of those petals. A little bit heavy-handed. Start filling in. So close up it might look a bit too much. I think it needs to be a little bit more even where I've done that. And that's really just getting used to this airbrush. You can see it does give a very fine controlled spray. It just breaks up perhaps some of the primary brightness of the colour around there. It's a bit crude. I'm not that happy with that area, but I think it adds something a little bit more. For me, there needs to be something a bit more textural in the colour, and so maybe that would be better served by doing it with the stencil still being in place. It's always a bit tricky to find exactly where it was, but while I've got you here, let's have a quick spin round. If you spot the match before me, stop me. No, I don't know why it's so blooming hard to find it. I can't be bothered. I'm just going to do something very experimental. Put a bit of shade, a bit of shadow on there. Now that lifts that flower in a way that the other red ones aren't lifted, I think. For me, that is an improvement. Similar thing with this orange one. Let's do a quick go. I love it when I get to play in front of other people and you see the stupid things I try. Okay, I'm going to stop there, otherwise we'll get well past 6 o'clock and I've got a 6 o'clock conversation coming up with someone. Right, so thanks, Hayley. Looking much better now. Edges have been included with them being darker. Thank you. Not just me who thinks that then. I'm pleased. So there you go. There it is in all its glory. And I hope you enjoyed watching it. And if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below. And don't forget, while you're here, to click that subscribe button. And if you want to be a newsletter subscriber, the link to that is in the description below the video. Thanks for watching.